Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 17th of July of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to start with the south here, with the Black Sea. Today we will discuss one very important topic, of course, regarding the Crimea Bridge, regarding the situation, and I'll give you a very interesting piece of information for your analysis to understand the real purposes of the Ukrainians of that attack. And believe me, this is not just a regular media victory or something like this. So let's start from the beginning. This night at 3 a.m. of the local time, the Ukrainians attacked the bridge. There were a lot of talks, rumors, a lot of videos from this territory. Some sources were saying that Ukrainians attacked this bridge from the south. Some sources were saying that this bridge was attacked from the north, but it doesn't matter, to tell the truth. We will just take a look at the video of the results of that attack. As you can see, the bridge, and we see that one part of the regular road was damaged, and basically the Russians were forced to block and to stop the movement of the cars, light cars and trucks along the bridge. And this is the first interesting piece of information. First of all, why the Ukrainians took a decision to attack a regular bridge, regular road, but not the railroad bridge. And this is the question that I had since the beginning of this day, and I couldn't find an answer to this question. Later I got an answer, and I'll share with you the answer to this question a little bit in a few minutes later. So basically the road was cut off from Crimea to the mainland, and basically the light vehicles are no longer able, and people are no longer able to use the bridge for moving, for crossing this area and so on. But the railroad bridge wasn't damaged. And of course, we can say that the purposes of Ukrainians was to cut the supply of Crimea before the beginning of the greatest counteroffensive operation, but we see that Ukrainians managed to destroy just the regular bridge, not the railroad bridge. So basically, we can say that the Russian logistic haven't been damaged a lot. Yes, there is a problems with the bridge, but when talking about the global support, global supply, global logistic, Crimea and Russian military forces on the territory of Crimea, South Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia and Kherson area will receive everything they need, because for these purposes the Russians mainly use the railroadways. So then the question, what was the purpose of that attack if basically the Ukrainians haven't managed to achieve a lot? Yes, media victory, they shown their people in Ukraine that they're able to do this, that they damaged Russian bridge and so on after a failure attempts to attack Russian positions in Zaporizhzhia and South Donetsk. Maybe this is the best solution for the Ukrainian authorities, how to leave this critical situation with very poor results during the counteroffensive operation. Before we continue, I would like to add that all this time above the Black Sea, the Russians discovered and saw the global hawk of United States of America. There were two global hawks of United States of America and one Boeing RC-135 of United Kingdom. All this time, those time, the United States and United Kingdom were making some kind of reconnaissance operation, and basically those planes were controlling, as I understand, were coordinating and navigating the Ukrainian forces during their attack against Crimea Bridge. So one more time, what was the purpose of that attack? And now we're coming to the most interesting part of the story. So the thing is that the Ukrainians haven't managed to destroy the railroad support. They haven't managed to achieve a lot during that attack. But somewhere at 1 p.m. of the local time, we got a very interesting piece of news from the territory of South Zaporizhzhia area and Kherson area. There is like icon, I have already added the icon, and the sources were saying that somewhere at 1 p.m. there was a real traffic jam in 25 kilometers. So this icon is geolocated, and basically the traffic jam took place somewhere on this line. We will add this with red color. So this territory was at 1 p.m. of the local time, was completely blocked, and the Russians, neither the Russian locals, people, military forces were able to use this part of the road for transferring, for moving and so on, because this area was completely blocked because of traffic jam. I'll remind you that During the special military operation, we know that there are very fierce fightings in Zaporizhzhia, South Donetsk area, and there is one important supply road that the Russians are using, and are planning to use in the future between the front lines, between the combat lines. This is the main logistic road that the Russians use to send vehicles, armored vehicles, shells, munitions, reinforcements, reserves, and so on. And I'm talking about the road between Melitopol, this one, Berdyansk, and Mariupol. This is the first, biggest, and the most important supply road that the Russians used to during the previous counter-offensive operation, and the Russians were pretty flexible and mobile. They have repaired this road and so on. The second road that the Russians were using is the road between Melitopol and Crimea. This part of road the Russians were using to send strategical operational reserves and tactical reserves from Crimea in direction of South Donetsk area and Zaporizhzhia area as well. So basically, we see that as a result of that attack, the Russians, there is a panic, and a lot of people who weren't able to use the ships between Crimea and mainland of Russia took a decision to go to the north and to use the main military Russian supply road for evacuation. Of course, and now it's become more and more interesting, right? And after that, I tried to understand the real situation with jams, with traffic jam on this area. And for these purposes, I start using the Google Maps, Google Map, and basically I found out that for some reason the Google Map doesn't show the traffic jam on the territory of Ukraine, on the south territory of Ukraine. So the last information we can receive from Crimea, see there's a green lines and probably there is no problems. And when we enter the territory of South Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia, we can't see any piece of information regarding the traffic jams. And the next territory we can find the movements and the information about the traffic jam is the territory of Russian Federation. But there are two important pieces of information about the traffic jam, and we can make our own projection, our own small speculation about the situation. And for these purposes, we can use the last kilometers of the territory of Crimea and Russia to see probably approximate situation of traffic jam in Zaporizhzhia, South Donetsk, and Kherson area. And let's take a look at Kherson area, and we see a red line. You see, that's who used the navigation. We understand what does red line means. So after that, we see that information disappears, and we stop receiving any updates about the traffic jam. But anyway, this red line tell us that the movements when in entering zone to this Zaporizhzhia and Kherson area have very big traffic jam. So basically cars are standing there without any progress in the future further. And if we take a look at the exit territory, we see the same picture. So when people leave the territory of South Donetsk area of Mariupol, we see another traffic jam on the exit road from this territory. So basically we see, let's return back to our map, we see that when people try to enter, there is a traffic jam, and when people try to leave this territory, there is also traffic jam. So basically, according to this piece of information, as I understand, the entire and the most important Russian logistic road is completely under very heavy traffic jam all over the length of this supply road. Basically, and there are not just military cars, there are a lot of light cars, there are a lot of, I believe, car accidents. So basically, this entire supply road has been collapsed as a result of missile attack against a regular bridge in Crimea. And that was the real purposes of the Ukrainians. They didn't want to cut supply road between mainland and Russian Federation with the train attack against the railroad ways. They wanted to create a panic, and they wanted to collapse supply road between Melitopol, Mariupol, and Crimea before the next wave of Ukrainian greatest counteroffensive. Because currently, if the Ukrainians, let's say, attack in direction of from Ugledar in direction of Mariupol, or if the Ukrainians attack in direction of Tokmak, the Russians will be reduced in their possibilities to be mobile with reserves, with forces, with shells, with support, with supply, because of traffic jam along the entire supply road that goes on the south. The Russians currently use just these roads and they try to accumulate their forces as far as reserves, I'm talking about reserves of course, as far as possible from the combat line, because because of HIMARS and because of missile attacks from the Ukrainian side. They just want to be on the safe side. And currently, if the Ukrainians launch attack, the Russians will be forced to spend a lot of time before they are able to get to the combat line. So as I understand, this is exactly the plan of the Ukrainians if they are smart. Of course, maybe this is not the things that they were planning and supposed to see, but currently we see this as a result of that attack, and now it's question whether that was a real plan of the Ukrainians or they can use the situation in their favor. And another question, whether the Russians have and understand right now what is going on with their main support road, and whether they're able to fix the situation and not to be collapsed completely if the Ukrainians launch a very massive attack somewhere in the vicinity of, let's say, Vremivka tactical bridgehead or Tokmat. This is a very important question, and the thing is that the Ukrainians don't have much time. They have a very small window of opportunity, maybe a day, maybe two, because as soon as the Russians understand that this is the situation, as soon as they understand that they need somehow to fix this issue, of course they will block this road for local cars and they will ask people to evacuate from Crimea just using the ships between Crimea and mainland, and after that they will be able to restore the situation. But now, while nobody understands the real consequences and the result of that attack, the Ukrainians can use the situation in their favor and attack. So that's why I expect that this night, from 17th of July to 18th of July, the Ukrainians will try to use this opportunity and will launch the most massive attack in there since the beginning of the special military operation, with one purpose: to penetrate the Russian defense belt, to use the situation with collapse of main supply road, and to get the results they were planning to achieve before the NATO summit. And that's it about the situation. Now let's talk about the situation on the ground. We will start from Kherson area because we are very close to this situation. The Ukrainians continue developing their bridgehead on the Russian side of the Dnipro River, and today the Ukrainians published the video how the Russians were stepping back from Antonov Bridge. This video is geolocated. We see how the Russian soldiers were trying to run from the north to the south, from Antonov Bridge to the south in direction of Oleshki. We see how light vehicle came for them, and after that the Russians left this territory completely. So basically this is a geolocated video, confirms that the Russians left the islands between Oleshki and, let's say, and the Dnipro and Antonov Bridge as well, and somehow to spin down and slow down the Ukrainians and not to allow them to attack the Russians in their back. The Russians continue bombing the edge positions of the Ukrainians in the hotel in the vicinity of Antonov Bridge. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of fierce fightings in this area, the Ukrainians lost 40 soldiers, 8 armored vehicles and 2 artillery systems. Now we are moving to the Vremivka to Zaporizhzhia area, and we're going to start with Petykhatki. The Ukrainians continue accumulation their forces, as I told you, as a result of Crimea Bridge attack. The Ukrainians will, according to my understanding of the situation, will launch their massive attack during this night because they don't have much time. They don't have very big window of opportunity. This is the only opportunity they have, and the Russians also see this, and they continue bombing and shelling the Ukrainians all over the combat line, those forces that Ukrainians are trying to accumulate before another wave of attack. For example, if a squad of platoon of Ukrainian forces entered Petykhatki in the forest. This video is geolocated. They were trying to land their troops to capture trenches, to accumulate forces, but the Russians controlled this territory, and as soon as they discovered the Ukrainians, they started bombing and shelling them, and a lot of Ukrainians were wounded, and the Ukrainians were forced to make some evacuation operation. Furthermore, the Russians are bombing not just the edge positions, but also the Russians try to track and discover the Ukrainian forces in the back, in the settlements like Stepova. And in this video, we see the usage of FAB 250 against the Ukrainian positions in Stepova. Now we are moving to the Orechov, to the Vremivka, to Bradley Square. And there were no changes during the previous 24 hours. The Ukrainians continue regrouping and accumulating of their forces. As I understand, they're waiting a signal. There was a signal at 3 a.m. of the local time when the Ukrainians managed to destroy a bridge. Now they're waiting for a command, for an order. And basically they're waiting the climax of the traffic jam on the south, and as soon as they understand that time comes, they will launch offensive operation. And I expect this night a very strong and very tough, very difficult night for the Russians. So we'll see whether my projections is true or not. But anyway, the idea is very good, as I understand, for the Ukrainians, of course. The Ukrainians published the video, the Russians published the video how they were bombing and shelling the Ukrainian positions on the combat line. Those forces that Ukrainians have already accumulated and have already prepared before the next wave of attack. On this video, we see how the Russians using drones attacked the ex-Russian trenches that were captured by the Ukrainians. Furthermore, the Russians published the video how they're bombing and shelling the forest lines. Very interesting, very interesting thing from at least from this video. We don't see the Ukrainian positions. We just see that the Russians attack every single forest line in this area, and the reason is that almost every single line, every single tree is under complete Ukrainian control, and under every single tree, under single forest line, there are hundreds and hundreds of Ukrainians, as we discussed, who waits just one thing: in order to launch offensive operation to the south. Now we're moving to the east. Just an interesting geolocated video from the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainians published the video how they were bombing and attacking the Russian trenches in the vicinity of Bilohorivka. We are using this video just to show the geolocation of Russian position, which confirms the Russian positions in the north of Novopokrovka. Now we are moving to the Vremivka tactical bridge. The Russians reported that as a result of fierce fightings, they managed to repel every single Ukrainian attack in direction of Urozhaine and in direction of Staromayorska. In this settlement, the Russians also published the video of Ukrainian attempt to attack, and to tell the truth, it wasn't even an attack from the Ukrainian side. I believe that Ukrainian forces received an order, maybe the reconnaissance discovered that there were no Russian forces in the northern part of that settlement for some reason. And the Ukrainian reconnaissance squad received an order to attack. The Ukrainians managed to enter the northern part of the settlement without even a shot, without even any clashes, and as soon as they entered the settlement, the Russians received an order to start bombing and shelling these positions, and basically the edge Ukrainian reconnaissance squad got into the artillery back and was completely destroyed, and those who were able to survive, those who survived, just withdraw their positions to the north. So that was the situation, and that was the update regarding the piece of news that we received 2 days ago that Ukrainians managed to enter Staromayorska. That wasn't any capturing, that was just a reconnaissance operation, maybe very successful or not so successful. It's up to you to judge the situation. As I see, it was just, I don't know what, it was a special operation from the Russians when they were trying to force the Ukrainians to move some forces that got into artillery back and was completely destroyed. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of fierce fightings on the line between Petykhatki and Ugledar, the Ukrainians lost 240 soldiers, 4 armored vehicles, and 6 artillery systems. The Russians continue the effective artillery duels, and as you can see, the level of losses among the artillery is very heavy. For today, we haven't received many geolocated videos from the Ukrainian side, how they were bombing and destroying Russian artillery systems. So we see that maybe the previous days finished in Russian favor. Now we're moving to Donetsk, and today we got a lot of very interesting updates. Right before I start making this video, some Russian sources reported that they launched counter-offensive operation in the vicinity of Krasnogorovka, and as a result of that attack, the Russians managed to capture or to move closer to Krasnogorovka for another kilometer. I believe that all those clashes took place along these ex-railroad ways, and if you remember a few weeks ago, the Ukrainians launched an attack and and managed to capture some territory, and now the Russians, just as I understand, managed to recapture their lost positions, nothing more. Today we got more videos, more of the battle in the vicinity of Severna Toninka, where this battle took place on the 12th of July, a few days ago, and currently we receive the video from another angle showing us the details of that Russian counterattack, a lot of armored vehicles, a lot of infantry. The same story, they got into artillery back, and the Ukrainians were trying to slow down, to pin down them and to destroy some of the armored vehicles the Russians lost. But anyway, as a result of those clashes, the Russians managed to push the Ukrainians back from the fields between Toninka and Vadiana, and the Russians recovered their lost positions during that they lost during the June of this summer. Now we're moving to Klishchiivka, to this area. There are very fierce fightings in this area. We got some updates on the ground. Finally we got some first video confirmations of the Ukrainian progress. And for example, today the Russians published the video how they were bombing and shelling these fortifications on the west from Klishchiivka. And this area, basically this Russian video confirms the Ukrainian progress in this bridgehead, and that the Ukrainians managed to capture these trenches. During this video we saw how we can see how the Ukrainians are trying to develop their positions, to dig in deeper, to prepare the trenches and stronghold before the next waves of their attacks. And basically the Ukrainians did capture these fortifications, and currently they're located right in front of Klishchiivka fortifications. So basically the Ukrainian positions are here, and probably they're doing some regrouping before the next wave of attack. The Russians tried to bomb and shell the Ukrainian positions in their back, and today they published another video how they discovered and tracked some Ukrainian positions among the forests in the vicinity of Alexandra Shultina, and they tracked some vehicles, and as a result of artillery attack they destroyed something. For now it's very difficult to understand what exactly the Russians managed to destroy. From the other side, Ukraine continued doing the same job. They tried to attack the Russian back positions, and today we got another video how the forces of Ukrainian 3rd Brigade, Storm Brigade, discovered the Russian T-80 tank, and which was attacking the Ukrainian positions. From this position, and the Ukrainians managed to discover. After that, as I understand, the tank understood that he was discovered, and he took a decision to change their position. The Ukrainians were tracking him and were following him, and as soon as the tank stopped, the Ukrainians made another wave of attack, and basically as a result of another wave of attack they managed to damage or maybe even to destroy the tank. Let's take a look this video till the end. So the Russians took a decision to hide, and after that, yes, they attacked this tank with artillery. The tank was damaged, and the Russian tank drivers took a decision to step back. One of the soldiers got on fire. Also, the Russians published the results and episodes and videos of the very fierce fightings on the northern flank, and this video shows us the real disaster of the Ukrainians. They were trying to attack the Russians. This video is also geolocated. On this video we can see that a lot of armored vehicles, a lot of tanks, a lot of Ukrainian positions were under very heavy fire from the Russian side, and the Ukrainians lost a lot of soldiers, a lot of tanks, armored vehicles during those attempts to attack. They were forced to step back towards their more reliable positions, and currently, as we can see, there are no progress from the Ukrainians as well as from the Russian side, and the front line and combat line currently is the same as we saw a month ago or something like this. So there are no changes, just the fierce battles without any result for Ukrainian side because they're in offensive state. Very interesting videos are coming from Berestova, where the Ukrainians continue developing their offensive operation. As I told you, this is one of the most interesting part of the combat line, of the front line. We discussed this area for many times. The Ukrainians made, during the previous week or weeks, they made a lot of operations in this area, a lot of things. If you remember, we published a lot of videos how the Ukrainians were bombing and shelling the Russians among the trenches, how the Ukrainians were bombing the Russians in Berestova, behind the Berestova. There was maybe 20 or 30 videos from this territory where we could see how the Ukrainians, the forces of 10 Mountain Assault Brigade, was attacking the Russian forces. And today we got at least 3 videos from this area. The first one shows us how the Ukrainians managed to discover, the force of 10th Mountain Assault Brigade managed to discover the Russian vehicle, and then it was like armored vehicle, as you can see, a personal armored carrier, and with drone the Ukrainians attacked this carrier. As you can see, the Russian Russians were able to evacuate, run away, and after that, the Ukrainians sent another drone with grenade and they destroyed that personal carrier. Also, we got a very interesting video that the Ukrainians, after those days of preparation, the Ukrainians launched their offensive operation. And this video, we see the real close combat when the Ukrainians were trying to storm the Russian trenches. And at some point of the close battle, the Russians took a decision to withdraw and to run from their positions, probably because of risk of being encircled. So anyway, this video confirmed that as a result of fierce fightings, the Ukrainians managed to capture the railroadways and to force the Russians to step back. The Russians sent the reinforcements to return the lost positions. For these purposes, the Russians were using tanks, squads, tank platoon. There was at least maybe 4 tanks that were involved in that operation, but the tanks got on minefields, and the Russians, at least this video show us that the Russians lost at least 2 tanks during counter-offensive operation when the Russians were trying to help their forces to hold their positions. So basically, as I understand, the Ukrainians, as a result of fierce fightings in this area, managed to return control over this bridgehead. This is very important because currently, if the Ukrainians were able to do this, currently we can talk about the beginning of offensive operation from the Ukrainian side in direction of Bilohorivka and Berestova. And currently, and this situation is from now on is very critical for the Russians. They need to find a solution how to prevent any further progress of the Ukrainians on this bridgehead. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of fierce fightings from Donetsk to Sporne and Berestova to this area, the Ukrainians lost 320 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles, and 5 artillery systems. The Russians reported that they managed to repel 13 attacks during the previous day. The Ukrainians continue bombing and shelling the Russian positions. The Russians continue bombing and shelling the Ukrainians in the bridgehead between Grigorivka, Bilohorivka, and Verkhnyokamyanskaya. On this video, we see how the Russians, just as you can see, just a little bit to the north, the Russians are bombing the Ukrainians. But when talking about Sporne, we haven't received any videos from the Russian side about any successful usage of bombings. But 20 kilometers to the north, and we see how the Russians are trying to attack and destroy the Ukrainian warehouses, ammo depots, the Ukrainian positions, and so on. And on this video, we see how the Russians destroyed few ammo depots, Ukrainian forces along the Seversky Donetsk River, and so on. So they're very pretty successful, but for some reason they're not changing their focus and they're not helping the Russian forces, who is currently repelling the Ukrainian attacks in the vicinity Berestova and Vasylievka. Now we're moving to the Liman area. We haven't received any geolocated video. I believe there are very fierce fightings. The Ukrainians made more attempts to attack the Russian positions. There are very fierce fightings. One more time, I am telling you this. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine reported that the Russians are pushing in this area, that they have accumulated 100,000 soldiers, and that the Russians captured and currently control the initiative. Currently, there is initiative on the Russian side, and there is a very high chances, according to the Ukrainian sources, that the Russians are able to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt and to develop their progress on the line between Kupiansk and Liman. The Ministry of Defense reported that as a result of fierce fightings on the Tarskoye salient, the Ukrainians lost 60 soldiers. Very interesting updates continue coming from Karmazinovka, and today finally the military expert blogger confirmed our discussions and our topics that we have already discussed at least a week ago. If you remember, we discussed this bridgehead many times. I spent at least 2 or 3 videos about this area, telling you that the Russians managed to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt and to develop significant bridgehead in this area. We discussed a lot of geolocated videos of clashes on this side of the river, and just like a week after, the Russians military experts start confirming the material that we discussed a week ago. The Russians managed to cross the river to develop the bridgehead, and currently the Russians are trying to develop their offensive operation on this side of Zherebets River, trying to attack the Ukrainian positions, their supply roads, and they're trying to split this territory in 2 parts. Also, we got a very interesting video from another episode of Battle for Novosilovska. On this video, we see how the Russians, before the attack, were trying to demine the forest lines, and this is Russian T-64 that were demining this area, and he was pretty successful, at least until some point, but the last mine was fatal for him. The tank driver survived. He took his his things, and after that he started running away from this tank. And the Ukrainians, and he able to survive. The Ukrainians couldn't get him during his running away from the tank. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of fierce fightings on the Kupiansk front line, the Ukrainians lost 35 soldiers. There are a lot of very interesting updates are continue coming from the borderlands. Today, the Ukrainians published an ambush that they made against the Russian forces who was running along the road, along the borderline. The Ukrainian forces made an ambush and they destroyed the Russian truck, and the Russian soldiers were killed, probably just the driver who was killed. But anyway, this video confirms that there are still a lot of problems along the borderline, and that the Russians still haven't managed to fix these issues. And we see that for now there are no solution, as well as there are no still yet solution for Crimea Bridge as well. Now we are moving to the territory of to Kiev, to Zelensky. Today, some sources published a very interesting piece of information that Ukrainians are not going to stop the grain deal, and currently the Ukrainians are working with Turkey's side and United Nations organization to continue the grain deal, but without, let's say, support, help, or without the Russians. So they're planning to continue, and this is very interesting because we understand that if the Russians left the grain deal, that means that they need to block the port and they need to stop any passage of any cargoes on the Black Sea. If they can't do this, everybody in the world will understand that they can continue without asking any permission from the Russian side. But if the Russians left the grain deal, that means that they have already found a solution how to stop and to block this support. If you ask my opinion, the only possible solution is to destroy the port facility and to reduce the port facilities to ruins. This is the only solution, because if they will start bombing and attacking the civilian ships, it can intensify the aggression from the Western countries, and the Ukrainians will have right to ask some kind of help from the Western countries, like to establish safe road with the fleet of NATO countries in this area. So I think that the only possible solution is just to destroy the port. And we will finish this video with reports from Belarus. Today we got more videos and more updates. So this is the Wagner camps, and these two video pictures show the same area. On the 14th of July and 16th of July, you see the difference. There are a lot of vehicles, a lot of new buildings, a lot of camps of Wagners, and furthermore today we got a lot of video confirmations of transferring Wagners on the territory of Belarus. There are a lot of convoys of Wagners with forces, with troopers, and they were published from different sides of Belarus along the way to the camps. So the Russians continue accumulating a very powerful army in Belarus. For now it's very difficult to understand the purposes, whether it's a false flag and the Russians are trying to change the Ukrainian forces before their offensive operation along Sumy and Kharkiv area, as we discussed in my previous evening video, or maybe the Russians do have some plans to open the second front line exactly somewhere in the south of Belarus. I believe that we are going to understand this very soon, in a month or in two, but anyway, somewhere during the summer period of time. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.